Hello everyone. So in today's video, I'm going to show you all how to add client-side form validations to any payment form you have in your dApp. I'm going to be adding this feature to the contribution input field within my decentralized crowdfunding app. This Discover component contains all the open projects and is where users can find projects that they would be interested in supporting. If a user inputs a DAI amount in this contribution field that is more than the amount that they have in their wallet, for instance, they have 868 DAI in their wallet, they input 1,000. I want this contribution button, in this case, to be disabled and a tooltip to trigger above it that states the user has an insufficient DAI balance. Similarly, if the user wants to contribute in DAI using ETH by toggling this Pay with ETH button, I want to make sure that the contribution button is disabled if the quoted ETH cost that's displayed below the form is greater than the user's ETH balance. So for instance, if they decide to contribute 1,000,000 DAI using ETH, in that case, the quoted ETH cost is greater than their ETH balance. So I'd want the contribution button to be disabled and then a tooltip to appear above it stating that the user has an insufficient ETH balance. And in the case where the user, for instance, wants to contribute 1,000 DAI directly, in that case, I want the contribution button to be disabled. But if they toggle Pay with ETH and the ETH cost is less than their ETH balance, then I want the contribution button to be enabled again. Okay, so with that explanation out of the way, I'm going to show you all how to code this feature. So here's my file tree. My user interface is broken up into different components, as you can see here. And in this tutorial, we're going to work on the Discover component exclusively. So first things first, I'm going to need to import my ETH balance and DAI balance selectors from my selectors file. So in case you don't know what a Redux Selector is, it's just a function that derives and formats data from the state. This helps to keep my state as minimal and easy to read as possible. So if I go to my selectors file, you can see that I've already declared an ETH balance and DAI balance selector, which I've imported into my navbar to display the user's balances, as you can see here. So now I can just import them into my Discover component like so. Whoops. There we go. So now I want to add an insufficient balance attribute to the this.props object so we can use it in our Discover component. So something like this, insufficient balance. Now to do that, we need to modify the special map state to props function down here provided to us by Redux. Now all this function does is just extract data from the state that this component needs and returns a props object containing that data. So the first thing we need to do is declare as variables within this function all the data that we will use to define our insufficient balance property, which will include the ETH balance, DAI balance, Pay with ETH, and ETH cost. So first, we'll start with the balances. Assign that to the ETH balance selector. Pass in the state. Do the same thing for the DAI balance. All right. So now we're going to declare this Pay with ETH property within this object, and this ETH cost property is variables outside of the object. So we can do that like this. Replace the colon with the assignment operator. Do the same thing for the ETH cost. Sweet. Because we are declaring the pay with ETH as a variable and the ETH cost as a variable, we don't have to assign the value within the object. So we could just remove this and remove this. All right, so compiled with warnings, ETH balance is assigned a value but never used, DAI balance is assigned a value but never used. That's okay. We're about to use it right now. Sufficient balance. All right, so we know that the insufficient balance property value will depend on whether the user is paying with ETH or not. So what do I mean by that? So if they are paying with ETH, we need to check if the ETH balance is less than the ETH cost. And if not, we need to check if the DAI balance is less than the contribution amount. So we can express that logic in a clean manner using the ternary operator, which executes the first expression after the question mark if the condition before the question mark is true. And if it's false, it executes the expression after the colon. So what would that look like? So first we'll start off with the condition, pay with ETH. And if the user, and if it's true, if the user wants to pay with ETH, then we'll check to see if the ETH cost is greater than the user's ETH balance. And if the user decides not to pay with ETH, then we'll check, see if the contribution amount is greater than the user's DAI balance. So I think that just about does it for this function. And so now that we've added this insufficient balance property to the props object, can move this. We can start to modify the contribution button down here. So to help speed things along, I'm going to copy and paste some code from the React Bootstrap documentation that renders a disabled button that triggers a tooltip when hovering over it. So do that really quick. Copy to clipboard, and then we'll paste it. And then we'll format document. And then we're going to sandwich this button within the overlay trigger. Format it a little bit. Okay. So now that we've done some formatting, we want to modify this disabled attribute. So right now, the button is only disabled if the ETH cost is loading. We also want it to be disabled if the user has an insufficient balance, and we could do that using the OR operator. Insufficient balance. But we also want to make sure that we are only disabling the contribution, the button for the project that the user is inputting a DAI value into. So to do that, we'll specify that the targeted value has to be true. Targeted project. Okay. Oh, we have a few warnings from the compiler. Overlay trigger is not defined. Tooltip is not defined. It's okay. I'll just import them up here from React Bootstrap. Overlay trigger. And then tooltip. Sweet. Compiled successfully. We also want to specify when to show the tooltip using the show attribute of the overlay trigger element. So it'll look like this, show equal And we only want to show the tooltip if the user has an insufficient balance and the ETH cost is not loading. So this is because we need to wait until the ETH cost is loaded before we can determine if the user has an insufficient balance. So, and we also have to make sure that the tooltip is displayed on the targeted project. Okay, cool. So now we can work on modifying the tooltip. Just do a little bit of formatting. Okay. So we're going to write insufficient balance, but we want to specify what, like, is it an insufficient ETH balance or DAI balance? So in order to do that, we need to write some JavaScript code within this HTML element, and we can do that by using the curly braces. That's where we write our JavaScript code within. So we can utilize the ternary operator again. Now we know that if the user paid with ETH, then the user has an insufficient ETH balance if we're displaying the tooltip. So let's say pay with ETH. That's true. And in that case, I'm going to output ETH. And if not, output DAI. Okay. See if it compiled successfully. All right. I think that's about it. I think we've covered everything we need to implement this feature. So let's check out and see if the app is working as it should. So we're going to test to see if the feature is working whenever the user wants to pay with DAI directly. So we'll start with typing in the user's exact DAI balance, 868. Okay, contribution still enabled. And we'll increase that by 1, 869. Sweet, insufficient DAI balance. Contribution button has been disabled. That's what we expected. Now if we toggle this pay with ETH button on, the contribution button should be enabled because the user should have enough ETH to pay for $869 worth of DAI. Awesome, yes, it's been enabled. Now let's type in a DAI amount that the user cannot afford to pay with in ETH. So that would be, for instance, 1,000,000 DAI. Awesome, awesome. Contribution button has been disabled and the insufficient ETH balance tooltip has been triggered. Now let's see what happens when we toggle this off. It should go from insufficient ETH balance to insufficient DAI balance. Yes, sweet. It's working exactly as it should. So that's all I've got for today's video. If you found this helpful, make sure to leave a like and subscribe so I can reach a larger audience. Until next time.